Expose Evil here. Like, share, subscribe. Today I'm doing a video about how Valentine's Day is nothing more than a modified version of Lupercalia. As we see over and over again from the Catholic Church, they keep making up pagan holidays. Everything they do is pagan, from their symbolism to their rituals, everything. So it's nothing to argue about right there about Valentine's Day not being from Lupercalia. Go to the Vatican City. You got the keyhole that matches the marketplace that Hercules destroyed. Here from the cartoon. The middle of this Vatican City, they have a Egyptian obelisk, which is a symbol of phallic worship. You can see the pagan gods in the background, where it's holding the rose and the chocolate hearts, symbols of Valentine's Day. Now keep in mind the obelisk as being a symbol of phallic worship. Now my definitions are going to be coming from here, the Webster's Deluxe Unabridged Dictionary, 2nd edition. And not only does it have the main part of the dictionary in the back, it has a dictionary of noted names in fiction, mythology, and legend. So, if you get two definitions for one pagan deity, then I'm reading one from the main dictionary and one from this part. If you get one, it's from either or, the main part or this part. Lupercalia, Lupercalis, of Lupercus, from lupus, a wolf. An ancient Roman festival with fertility rites held on February 15, in honor of Lupercus, a pastoral god sometimes identified with Faunus. Lupercalia is connected with the she-wolf, or lupus, or Capitoline wolf, the wolf that suckled Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. Capitoline, coming from one of the 7 hills on which Rome was built. And also in Alexander Hislop's The Two Babylons, he matches up Vatican City, or the city of Rome, that was built on the 7 hills, to the beast with the 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, I have no definition for Lupercus in the Webster's, but here are some representations of him. He's often represented with the lupus wolf, but often as a fawn, and sometimes as a human also. And he has the goat legs here also. But he has an erection in this photo, so I only have half of his body. Remember, he is a phallic deity. I'm going to show you this first. Faun. Faunus, from favor, to be propitious. In Roman mythology, any of a class of royal deities differing little from satyrs. They are usually represented as being particularly human, but with a short goat's tail, pointed ears, projecting horns, and sometimes cloven feet. So keep this in mind. Faun is basically a satyr. Keep this word in mind, satyr. Now remember, it said Lupercus was Faunus. Faunus, in Roman mythology, a god of nature, the patron of farming and animals, and a giver of oracles. Oracles as in fortune-telling, divination, identified with the Greek Pan. Here's a representation of Faunus. Here is again with a flute in his mouth. And notice that 11 symbol in his hand. Pan, in Greek mythology, a god of fields, forests, wild animals, flocks, and shepherds, represented with the legs and sometimes horns and ears of a goat, identified by the Romans with Faunus. Now you see how he looks, with the pan flute in his mouth. We get two definitions for Pan. Among the Greeks and Romans, a god of flocks and herds, represented with two horns and pointed ears and goat's legs. Here's a statue of Pan with the young Daphnis, who he was sexually attracted to. Here he goes again, Pan, or Lupercus. Now, Pan is considered the horned god of witchcraft. Now, in paganism and witchcraft all around the world, they have different types of horned gods. You can find them with antlers, bull horns, goat horns. The horns just represent nature. Now, if you remember the Knights Templars, who were accused of worshiping the Baphomet, derived from Muhammad or Muhammad, Islam is down with it, an idol or spiritual symbol, which the medieval Knights Templars were accused of worshiping in their secret ceremonies. Now, I don't know if everyone knows, but the Knights Templars were accused of worshiping a skull. Now, the skull had horns on it. It wasn't just a regular skull. Pan, Faunus, Lupercus even appears in the cartoon Rugrats in the Passover episode at Tommy's grandparents' home. Pan from the new version of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is on Netflix. I remember from the definition of Faunus, he said not too different from a satyr. In Greek mythology, a sylvan deity or demigod, usually represented as part man and part goat, usually having horns on his head, a hairy body with feet and tail of a goat, an attendant of Bacchus. It is thought of as fond and righteous, merriment and lechery. See also fawn. Now they're telling us about Bacchus, aka Dionysus. Satyr is usually like the opposite of a nymph. A nymph. Notice it has a nymph from nympho, nymphomaniac, or whatever. In Greek and Roman mythology, any of a group of minor nature goddesses, represented as beautiful maidens living in rivers, mountains, trees, etc. Webster's has lots on Bacchus. Bacchanalia. In classical antiquity, feasts in honor of Bacchus, the god of wine, which were celebrated in spring and autumn with games and shows. In the equinoxes, spring and autumn. A drunken feast, an orgy. Bacchanalian, drunken, courser. See all this? The female participants are female priests, whatever, priestesses. Oh yeah, look, a priestess of Bacchus, of one who joined in the celebration of the feast of Bacchus, one in a state of bacchanal frenzy, hence a woman addicted to intemperance or bacchanalian revelry. Ugh, disgusting. Bacchus. In Greek and Roman mythology, the god of wine and revelry, son of Zeus, Jupiter, and Semele. Earlier called Dionysus by the Greeks, he is said first to have taught the cultivation of the grape and the preparation of wine and other intoxicating liquors. And he's usually depicted as Pan. He has two definitions. The Greek and Roman god of wine, son of Zeus, Jupiter, and Semele in Greek, commonly called Dionysus. Here's a depiction of Bacchus with the horns. Here's another depiction of him with wine, fruits, and grapes. Here he goes again. Okay, phallic, relating to the phallus. Remember from the obelisk in the middle of the Roman or the Vatican City? Phallicism, worship of the phallus. Or phallic, relating to the phallic, characteristic of phallicism. Phallicism, worship of the phallus as a symbol of the male generative power. Alright, see the other definitions. Skip to bottom. Phallus, a representation or image of the penis as a reproductive organ, worshipped as a symbol of generative power, as in the Dionysic festivals of ancient Greece for Dionysus. Dionysia. Offerings. The Dionysia from Dionysus. Any set of various Greek festivals in honor of Dionysus, especially those at Athens, from which the Greek drama originated. Dionysus. In Greek mythology, the god of vegetation and wine, identified with the Roman god Bacchus. Dionysus. A Greek name of the god Bacchus. Here he is. He's like an older version of Bacchus, but similar. The grapes, the wine. There's another statue of him. Now, Lupercalia is in part for Rhea Silvia. In Roman legend, a Vestal virgin who broke her vows and became by Mars, the mother of Romulus and Remus. Now, if you look up on the myth, you will find some that say Mars raped Rhea Silvia. And if you think about it, what this representation shows, or the sculpture, whatever they call it, and it has Mars standing over Rhea Silvia, and they explain that as Hypnos, putting her to sleep. Now, I know Hypnos is supposed to be a god, but what does Hypnos represent? Hypnotism. Hypnotism is very, goes hand in hand with satanic ritual abuse. And as we've seen the example from the movies that they put in the movie Get Out, when she hypnotized the boy and she made him go into the sunken place where he couldn't control his body anymore. Now, Rhea Silvia was a Vestal virgin. This means that she was a priestess of the goddess Vesta. Vestal, Vestilis, from Vesta, the goddess of fire, pertain to sacred to or devoted to Vesta, pure, chaste, of the Vestal virgins. Vestal, a virgin consecrated to Vesta into the service of watching the sacred fire, which was to be perpetually kept burning up upon her altar, a Vestal virgin. The Vestals were 6 in number. They entered the service of the goddess at from 6 to 10 years of age, their term of service lasting 30 years. Vesta, in Roman mythology, the goddess of the hearth and its fire, identified with the Greek Hestia. She was worshipped in the temple in which a sacred fire on the altar was tended by the Vestal virgins. Here's the goddess Vesta. It's not too many depictions of her online. Hestia, in Greek mythology, the goddess of the hearth, identified with the Roman Vesta, one of the nymphs guarding the golden apples of Hesperides. Now, as a nymph, that means she's a nature goddess. Remember, nature associated with horns. Hestia, the Greek name of the goddess Vesta. Take note that Hestia is the sister of Juno. Now, often these people seem to be one and the same with their brothers and their sisters and their sons and daughters for some reason. Like they're just made up, even though they say they have all these kids. In other myths, that might be their brother or their father. In one myth, like Pan might be the brother of Bacchus. In another myth, Bacchus might be the son of Pan. Or Pan might be the son of Bacchus. There's so much twisted confusion. Hesperides. In Greek mythology, 3 nymphs who lived in pleasant gardens in an island of the Western Ocean and had charge of a tree which produced golden apples. One of the labors of Hercules was to fetch apples from this tree, which was watched by a dragon. Now, I'm not even going to go into Hercules, but you can easily go into his and link him with the other deities that I already pulled up, like Bacchus, Dionysus, Pan. Now, Rio Silvia is obviously the daughter of Rhea, the goddess Rhea, which is the mother of Hestia or Vesta. So it's obviously another representation of her. And from what I read, she is connected to Rio, or Rhea comes from the word Rio, which means a current or a combining form, meaning a flow, a current, as in rheoscope. Now this will connect Rhea Silvia with this word because she placed Remus and Romulus, or whatever their names are, in a basket, and they flowed down the Tiber River, which connects her with, again, the goddess Rhea. And this is obviously a perversion of the Moses story. Now here's Mars, the father of Romulus and Remus. Mars, in Roman mythology, the god of war, identified with the Greek Ares. Mars, the Roman god of war, corresponding to the Greek god Ares. Mars is also the brother of Bacchus, and also the brother of Hercules, as was just mentioned, as he had to try to steal one of the golden apples protected by the nymphs. Here's a statue of Mars, god of war. Ares, in Greek mythology, the god of war, corresponding to Mars in Roman mythology. Ares, the Greek god of war, son of Zeus and Hera, identified with the Roman Mars. Here he is, and this is what he looks like. It's another god of war. Notice he has the helmet, shield. Now here's Rhea. Now obviously, Rhea Silvia is another depiction of Rhea. And Rhea is the mother of Hestia or Vesta. In Greek mythology, the daughter of Uranus and Gaia, wife and sister of Kronos, and mother of Zeus, Jupiter, Hestia, Vesta, Demeter, Ceres, Hera, Juno, Hades, Pluto, and Poseidon, Neptune, called the mother of the gods, identified with Cybele, remember, the mother of the gods. Rhea, a goddess of the Greeks and Romans, also known as Cybele. Here she goes right here. I believe she might have been holding a torch similar to the Statue of Liberty, representing the fire of Vesta. Now this is the Secret Teachings of All Ages, an encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolic philosophy, being an interpretation of the secret teachings concealed within the rituals, allegories, and mysteries of all ages, by Manly P. Hall. Found on page 72 of this PDF. And I wanted to point out this, connecting these several goddesses. In his book Numbers, Manly P. Hall talks about, W. Wynne Westcott says the duad, which duad is two, meaning two, like a division and splitting up one god into another god and giving them another name. It seems like basically along those lines. That's what duad means. Okay, and he says this in his book. As the monad is the father, so the duad is the mother. Therefore, the duad has certain points in common with the goddess Isis, Rhea, Pyrrhagia, Lydia, Dindymene, Cybele, and Ceres. Erato, one of the muses, Diana, because the moon is forked, Dictana, Venus, Doani, Cytherea, and Juno, because she is both the wife and sister of Jupiter, and Mia, the mother of Mercury. I know I butchered a lot of words. All right. Sorry about that. But you see, now we got Isis. Rhea's connected with Isis, Venus, Juno. And I find that interesting because Lupercalia is about Juno also. Now I found this online, illustrations of Shakespeare and the Ancient Manners, archive.org, found on page 470. It's pretty blurry, but I can make it out. It says, the custom of choosing Februara is a very long-standing and, like many others of a popular nature, is no more than a corruption of something similar that had prevailed in times of paganism. It was the practice in ancient Rome during a great part of the month of February to celebrate Lupercalia, which were feasts in honor of Pan and Juno, as we had linked, Lupercus and Rhea Silvia, where the latter deity was, can't make that out, Februaria, and Februaria. On this occasion, amidst a variety of ceremonies, the names of young women were put into a box from which they were chosen by a man as chance directed. The pastors of the early Christian church was by every possible means endowed to something of pagan superstitions, and clearly by some communication of their forms substituted in the present insolence the names of particular saints instead of those of the women, and as the festival of Lupercalia had commenced about the middle of February, they appear to have chosen the saint's name, chosen Saint Valentine's Day for celebrating the new feast, because it occurred nearly at the same time. And I try to sharpen it up. It's the best I can get. I'm going to slowly zoom in so people can try to read it themselves if you want to pause it. There you have it. Now from what we just read, we see that Juno is involved. And they call this Juno purification, or Juno Februara, or Juno February. February, originally the month of expiation, from February, a Roman festival of purification. Februm, a means of purification, the second month in the year, introduced into the Roman calendar by Numa, having 28 days in the regular years and 29 days in leap years. Juno Februata, a festival said to be Juno Februata or Juno Februa, though it does not appear in Ovid's Fasti, was described by Alban Butler, famous as the author of Butler's Lives of Saints, who presented an aspect of the Roman Lupercalia as a festival of Juno Februata under the heading of February 14th. Cybele, or maybe Cable? The goddess Cybele, in ancient Peruvian mythology, the goddess of nature, identified with the Greek goddess Rhea. Cybele, a goddess of agriculture and settled life among the Greeks and Romans, represented with a sort of towered crown on her head. And here she is, Cybele, Cable, whatever you want to call her. Now, from the secret teachings of all ages, we get that Rhea is similar to Juno. Now, Juno, in Roman mythology, the goddess of marriage, queen of the gods, wife of Jupiter, and the second highest divinity identified with the Greek Hera. In astronomy, one of the small planets or asteroids which revolve around the sun between the orbits of Mars and Jupiter. Now, all these constellations and planets and the moons that revolve around the planets and asteroids are all named after these pagan gods. Think about that. Why? Juno, the supreme goddess among the Romans, wife of Jupiter and queen of heaven, identified with the Greek Hera. And now the queen of heaven, the description I already proved in one of my videos that Venus is the queen of heaven. This is part of my other video, at least what I put into it. From Jeremiah 7:18, the children gather wood, and the fathers kindle the fire, and the women knead their dough, to make cakes to the queen of heaven, and to pour out drink offerings to other gods, that they may provoke me to anger. Angered God greatly. Jeremiah 44:17, but we will certainly do whatever thing goes forth out of our own mouth, to burn incense to the Queen of Heaven, and to pour out drink offering to her, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings, and our princes in the cities of Judah, and in the streets of Jerusalem. For then had we plenty of victuals, and were well, and saw no evil. To Eliot's commentary for English readers. The Queen of Heaven, the goddess thus described, was a kind of Assyrian Artemis, identified with the moon and connected with the symbolic worship of the reproductive powers of nature. Its ritual probably resembled that of the Babylonian Aphrodite, Mylitta, the mother goddess, in its impurities, and thus provoked the burning indignation of the prophet here and in Jeremiah 44:19, Jeremiah 44:25. The word rendered cakes and found only in connection with this worship was clearly a technical term and probably of foreign origin. Cakes of a like kind made of flour and honey, round like the full moon, and known therefore as celents or moons, were offered like the minchar. Sorry if I butchered these words. Or meat offerings in the Mosaic ritual of Nidir, and the Egyptian worship of the goddess Neith, at Athens to Artemis, and in Sicily to Hecate. The worship of Astaroth, Milton speaks of her as Astarte, Queen of Heaven, with crescent horn. Through the kindred nature was not identical with the Queen of Heaven, that name signifying a star and being identified with the planet Venus. Before I show you Venus, let me show you Hera, Juno's equivalent. Hera, in Greek mythology, the supreme goddess of heaven, the wife and sister of Zeus, identified with Juno by the Romans. Alright, they call her the supreme goddess of heaven instead of the queen of heaven. Hera, Greek equivalent to Juno. And here goes Hera. And note that she's a daughter of Rhea, and she is the sister and wife of Zeus. So, she's also one of the 12 Olympians. Many of the goddesses are named are one of the 12 Olympians and some of the gods. There's 6 and 6. 6 goddesses and 6 gods to make up the 12 Olympians. And I believe that they correspond with the 8 powers and 4 principalities of Satan and Satan's dark kingdom. As seen here in J.P. Timmons' Mysteries, Secrets of the Dark Kingdom, Battle for Planet Earth, these are the 8 powers and 4 principalities of Satan's dark kingdom, and I believe they correspond to the 12 Olympians. And actually, one of them is known to head the false religions. Miss Ashtaroth, or Mr. Ashtaroth, which is a demon. I don't know if they're male or female, it doesn't even matter. Known as Diana, Venus, Rhea, Isa, in India, Isis, Egypt, Shingmu, Irene, Holy Mother or Mother of God, often worshipped and prayed by Roman Catholics, the Madonna, the Queen of Heaven. Venus, in Roman mythology, an ancient Italian goddess of spring, bloom, and beauty, later identified with the Greek Aphrodite as goddess of love. Venus, the Roman goddess of love and beauty. Here goes Venus, which her symbol is a rose. If you remember from the beginning of the video, the Pope was holding a rose with the chocolate hearts. And you see her here with her son Cupid, which is another symbol of Valentine's Day, as is the rose. The rose as seen here in the Pope's hand. And the first Valentine's card with a representation of 2 Cupid-looking boys, made in 1909. Cupid, the god of love, from Cupido, passion, desire, of love, from Cupiri, to desire. In Roman mythology, the god of love, son of Venus, usually represented as a naked boy with wings and carrying a bow and quiver of arrows, and identified with the Greek god Eros. Number 2, a representation of Cupid as a naked winged boy, as on Valentine. As on a Valentine, like the Valentine card I showed you. The Roman god of love, son of Venus, the goddess of beauty. He is usually depicted as a naked infant with wings, armed with a bow and quiver full of arrows, identified with the Greek Eros. I think it might be important to say that Cupid is also the son of Mars and Venus, similar to Rhea, Sylvia, and Mars being the parents of Romulus and Remus, and them being connected to Lupercalia, like Cupid, the son of Mars, and Venus being connected to Valentine's Day. And also wanted to add this on for Venus, the most brilliant planet in the solar system, second in distance from the sun, anciently and poetically called Lucifer as the morning star and Hesperus as the evening star. And the symbol of Venus looks similar to the Ankh. And Venus was called the morning and evening star because they thought it was 2 different planets, because it has phases like the moon. So when they saw it on different days in a different phase, they thought this was different stars. So they called one the morning star, one the evening star. And it's the same as Lucifer, which means the light bearer. Aphrodite, the foam-born, so named because she was said to have sprung from the foam of the sea. Aphros, foam, and deity. Now, Jupiter or Zeus killed their father Saturn or Kronos and chopped off his genitals, and they fell into the ocean, and that is what caused the foam that birthed Aphrodite. Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love and beauty, identified by the Romans with Venus. She was of extreme beauty and was fabled to have risen from the sea near the island of Cyprus. Hephaestus, Vulcan, was her husband, and she was attended by Graces and Eros, Cupid, and often accompanied by doves. She had a notorious intrigue with Ares or Mars. Now here's Aphrodite, a statue of her. Now back to the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall, and reading out of the Wynne Westcott's book, Numbers. He linked Isis, Rhea, and all these other goddesses to each other, and we already covered Juno, Venus, Isis, Rhea, Cybele, and now let's check out Diana and Ceres and Isis. Diana, in Roman mythology, the goddess of the chase, of chastity, and of the moon, identified with the Greek Artemis. Diana, the Roman goddess corresponding to the Greek Artemis, the sister of Apollo, a virgin, goddess of hunting and of the moon. Virgin, like the Vestal Virgins. Here, Diana goes with the quiver and the arrow somewhere, and she has the dog or the reindeer sometimes. Next to Cupid with the arrow and quiver. Sometimes she has the crescent moon as a crown or horns, and they call this the crescent horned. Artemis, in Greek mythology, the goddess of the moon, wild animals, and hunting, Apollo's twin sister. She is identified with the Roman goddess Diana. Artemis, the Greek goddess identified by the Romans with Diana. And here goes Artemis, and those are bull's testicles around her neck, and you can find pictures of them squirting their seed out. Isis, one of the chief deities of the ancient Egyptian religion. She was regarded as the sister or sister wife of Osiris and the mother of Horus. She was worshipped by the Egyptians as the being who had first civilized them and as the goddess of fertility, and was represented with a cow's horns and a sun's disk as a crown. Now again, she's horned, matching her with other horned goddesses, and matching her with Fauna, the sister of Faunus. Isis, an Egyptian goddess of the moon, wife of Osiris and mother of Horus, often represented as veiled. Here goes a statue of her. A History of Phallic Worship by Richard Payne Knight. Page 120. Among the Egyptians, as before observed, the cow was the symbol of Venus, the goddess of love and passive generative power of nature. On the capitals of one of the temples of Phili, we still find the heads of this goddess represented of a mixed form. The horns and ears of a cow being joined to the beautiful features of a woman in the prime of life, just like Fauna would be represented, right? The sister of Fauna, or the sister of Faunus, represented like a fawn, sometimes with the goat leg, sometimes without it, sometimes with the horns, sometimes without it, such as the Greeks attributed to that Venus, whom they worshipped as the mother of the prolific god of love. Cupid was the personification of animal desire, of concupiscence, as the Orphic love, the father of gods in men, was of universal attraction. The Greeks who represented the mother under the form of a beautiful woman naturally represented the son under the form of a beautiful boy. But the people who represented the mother under the form of a cow would as naturally represent the son under the form of a calf. Ceres, in Roman mythology, the goddess of agriculture, the daughter of Saturn and Ops, sister of Jupiter and mother of Proserpine, identified with the Greek Demeter. And here's a statue of her. Demeter, Duric, Demeter, from Greek Duric, earth, and meter, mother. In Greek mythology, a goddess corresponding in some respects to the Latin Ceres, the goddess of agriculture and fruitfulness, and protectress of marriage. She was mother of Bacchus. Demeter, the Greek goddess corresponding with the Roman Ceres. And here we have Demeter. Hecate, in Greek mythology, a goddess of the moon. Link her to Diana, the moon goddess. Earth, an underground realm of the dead, later regarded as the goddess of sorcery and witchcraft, also spelled Hecate, with a K. Hecate, a Greek goddess whose powers were various and who was sometimes confounded with Artemis, Diana, and Proserpine, but later became especially a goddess of the infernal regions and a patroness of magicians and witches. Here's a statue of Hecate. As you can see, I don't know if you want to call those horns, but very similar to the Statue of Liberty, which is nothing more than the goddess Liberty. Here's Proserpina, which is the same as Proserpine. In Roman mythology, the daughter of Ceres and the wife of Pluto, identified with the Greek Persephone. This is called the rape of Proserpina by Hades or Pluto, similar to the way Mars raped Vestia. Persephone, in Greek mythology, the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, abducted by Hades, Pluto, and made his wife, identified by the Romans with Proserpina. Persephone, the Greek equivalent to the Roman Proserpina or Proserpine. Here's Persephone, and you see she has the crescent moon, or the horned crescent, linking her with Fauna, the sister of Faunus. Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike. As I proved before, Freemasonry is nothing but Satanism or the worship of Tammuz and Nimrod. Now, Venus or Astarte was the great female deity of the Phoenicians, as Hercules, Melkarth, or Adani was their chief god. Adani, called by the Greeks Adonis, was the lover of Venus. Adani also means lord or master. Slain by a wound in the thigh, inflicted by a wild boar in the chase, the flower called anemone sprang from his blood. Venus received the corpse and obtained from Jupiter the boon that her lover should thereafter pass 6 months of each year with her and the other 6 in the shades with Proserpine. An allegorical description of the alternate residence of the sun in the 2 hemispheres. In these mysteries, his death was represented and mounted, and after this recreation and mourning was concluded, his resurrection and ascent to heaven were announced. Now, you see the lover of Venus or Astarte, Adonis, aka Tammuz, has the same exact story as Proserpine or Persephone. Now, normally all these gods and goddesses, their stories always represent astral projection or the movements of the celestial bodies. So always what it comes down to. A bunch of lies trying to get you to the spirit world, to Satan's dark kingdom, so you can be at his disposal. Now here it says, Ezekiel speaks of the festivals of Adonis under the name of those of Tammuz, an Assyrian deity, whom every year the women mounted, seated at the doors of their dwellings. These mysteries, like the others, were celebrated in the spring, at the vernal equinox. You see, the equinox. They always do stuff at the solstices and the equinoxes, when he was restored to life, at which time, when they were instituted, the sun, Adani, Lord or Master, was in the sign of Taurus, the domicile of Venus. He was represented with horns, and the hymn of Orpheus in his honor styles him the two-horned god, as Argos Bacchus was represented with the feet of a bull. So you see Bacchus represented with the feet of a bull, and now they're giving us Tammuz. So we're going to jump over to Tammuz, or Adonis. Adonia, a festival celebrated anciently in honor of Adonis by women who spent 2 days in alternate lamentation and feasting. And by the way, from the Albert Pike book, when he mentioned Ezekiel, talks about Tammuz, or Adonis under the name of Tammuz, he was talking about Ezekiel from the Bible. And Ezekiel 8:14, which says, weeping for Tammuz, exposes the pagan rituals that are done. And Ezekiel 8 is called the visions of idolatry. You should start with Ezekiel 8, and I did a few videos on them also if you would like to see them. So, Adonic, a verse consisting of a dactyl and a spondy trochee, as those used in bewailing the death of Adonis. Adonic, it pertained to Adonis. Adonis, in Greek mythology, a young man loved by Aphrodite because he was so handsome. He was killed by a wild boar. In Greek mythology, a beautiful youth beloved by Venus and killed by a wild boar. The myths connected with Adonis are of Eastern origin, and he himself appears to be a personification of the sun. Remember that he's a sun god. And here's a statue of him. Tammuz. Sumerian Dizamuz, the Assyrian Babylonian Duzu, son of life, sun who rises, a Babylonian and Assyrian god whose supposed annual death and resurrection symbolize the winter and spring cycle, the 10th month of the Jewish year, also spelled Tammuz. Tammuz or Tammuz, a Babylonian god of agriculture, the Syrian counterpart of Adonis. And here goes Tammuz, looking like Horus, because Horus is him, or a depiction of him also. Okay, the secret teachings of all ages, an encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolic philosophy being an interpretation of the secret teachings concealed within the rituals, allegories, and mysteries of all ages by Manly P. Hall. Now it says, the great Pan was celebrated as the author and director of the sacred dances, which he is supposed to have instituted to symbolize the circumambulations of the heavenly bodies. Pan was a composite creature, the upper part, with the exception of his horns, being human, and the lower part in the form of a goat. Pan is the prototype of natural energy, and while undoubtedly a phallic deity, should nor be confused with Priapus. The pipes of Pan signify the natural harmony of the spheres, and the god himself is a symbol of Saturn. Now we're connecting him to Saturn, aka Kronos, because this planet is enthroned in Capricorn, whose emblem is a goat. The Egyptians were instituted into the mysteries of Pan, who was regarded as a phase of Jupiter, the demiurgus. Pan represented the impregnating power of the sun, just like Adonis is the sun god, or a personification of the sun, and was a chief of a horde of rustic deities and satyrs. He also signified the controlling spirit of the lower worlds. Fabricated a story to the effect that at the time of the birth of Christ, the oracles were silenced after giving utterance to one last cry: the great Pan is dead. Later on in the same book, he says, Masonry came to northern Africa and Asia Minor from the lost continent of Atlantis, not under its present name, but rather under a general designation of sun and fire worship. And Atlantis, I believe, is just a perversion of the flood. I don't believe that there was some great city of Atlantis. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I think it's just a perversion of the flood. not under its present name, but rather under the general designation of sun and fire worship. The ancient mysteries did not cease to exist when Christianity became the world's most powerful religion. Great Pan did not die. Freemasonry is the proof of his survival. And I'm going to close it with this. This is from David Carrico's The Egyptian Masonic Satanic Connection. And he got this from a pamphlet called The Master Mason, authorized by the Committee on Masonic Education. And I believe it was put out by the Free and Accepted Masons of Indiana. It's a pamphlet. It's an old pamphlet, like 1800s or early 1900s. The idea that lies behind the Homeric legend is as old as religious thinking among men. Now, Homeric legend, they're talking about Hiram Abiff, or Hiram Abiff, which is the central character of allegory in Freemasonry, which they pretend to be in their rituals and ceremonies. The same elements existed in the story of Osiris, which was celebrated by the Egyptians in their ancient temples. The old Persians told it concerning Mithras, their hero god. In Syria, the Dionysian mysteries had the very same elements in the story of Dionysus. For the Romans, Bacchus was the god who died and lived again. There is also the story of Tammuz, older than any of these. These are collectively referred to as the ancient mysteries. They are celebrated by secret societies much like ours, with allegorical ceremonies during which the initiates were advanced from one degree to another in these old societies. Read these old stories for yourself and marvel how men in all ages have taught the same great truths in the same effective way.